There's someone I want to give credit to before I start this video. Ultimate History of CGI. He's the one who did all the true work that made this video possible. He did so much research into CGI and compiled it into one website. And without it, I would not have been able to see all of these CGI films. He's the main source I used to make this video. Some parts of the video are quite close to repeating what's already on his website. He's the one who deserves all the attention. So go check out his channel. His websites are currently down, sadly, so you should just go check out his YouTube channels. CGI. It's something we've all seen. And it's always just been there for some of you. You don't really notice when it's good, but you can really tell when it's bad. The first time I saw CGI was when I was watching VeggieTales. I was 5 or 3. Back then I couldn't tell if a cartoon was 2D, 3D. It was all the same to me. But I could see something was different about it. But now I have grown, and now I know it's this wonderful thing called CGI. But there was something I found different about VeggieTales, and I learned that's just how CGI used to look. And I found it charming. I came to learn through my curiosity over the years that CGI, which most people think started in like the 80s or 70s, is actually an older invention. The first use of CGI, in fact, was in the 1950s. Sit back and relax. Enjoy yourself as you enter the wonderful world of old CGI. So what was the first use of CGI? Well, that's hard to answer. It depends on the definition of CGI, so let's pin something down so we aren't here all day. In my opinion, the first use of CGI wasn't what we see in the modern day. The first use of CGI can be seen in the 1958 Alfred Hitchcock movie, Vertigo. The CGI in Vertigo is a bit different to what we view as CGI. The CGI here is actually mechanical instead of digital. The crew on the movie wanted spirals to depict scenes in the film, and those spirals could not be done with hand, so instead a man by the name of John Whitney, who is known for using mechanical animation in media, and that media being quite abstract in nature. He made a lot of these with his brother too, by manipulating cutouts to mess with lights, creating abstract works. His work even led to him getting an award from IBM later in life. But how did he make this early form of CGI? Well, he used tech from World War II to do it. Whitney partnered with Saul Bass, a famous graphic designer who had multiple title sequence for shows and movies. He was quite revered for being innovative in his work, having worked on projects before this one and many after it. They made a sequence of animation using a cam machine made from an anti-aircraft targeter run by a computer, and then he controlled the positioning of the targeter and celluloid with a pendulum. Don't get mad at me for my pronunciation. Which, when moving with the targeter, created the spiral effect seen in the film. It was a lot of work, and I think it paid off. The movie Vertigo uses the spirals to represent a psychological obsession, and the film simply would not have been the same if these spirals were done entirely by hand. This doesn't look like a lot, but you have to remember this is just the start. It is quite basic, but it's a start. As we leave the 50s and enter the 60s, more technical improvements happened due to a certain war that was going on at the time. John Whitney starts out this decade with another animation for the movie catalog, and it's trippy. It shows off his catalog of work, of stuff he has done in the past and is still doing, at the time. Well, there's a lot of stuff going on to make this. It's very complicated, and while looking for information about the film, I found this commenter that explains the process perfectly. Better than I ever could, so let's read it. Assisted by Whitney's two sons, John Jr. and Robert, original images were only black and white, and each element of the final composite was created separately, then transferred to high-contrast black and white 35mm film. Color was added to each element on a film contact and/or optical printer, and combined via multiple passes through the printer to create a single master negative from which the final prints were made, with a photographic optical soundtrack added to the edge of the film before development. This massive amount of work, creative decisions, and technical expertise was how they all made their pioneering films, which were originally sold to colleges and library in 16mm by an art for art's sake distributor called Pyramid Films. They were also the first to create fully rendered, shaded, non-film color computer graphics in 1977. I hope that helped you understand exactly what happened and how it worked. Now on to the next film. Even his brother, who he had worked with in the past, James Whitney, made a film in 1966 called Lapis, and it's clearly 1960s. It's done how they had done it in prior works, but this one in fact looks better. It shows some clear improvement, and it's almost spiritual in a way, even if helped by a computer. This certainly took a long time to do, and the technical aspect doesn't even stand out to me here, because these works are something else. This is true art. 1961 marks a bit of shift in the CGI world, with CGI now being more digital and entering an era I like to call the Wireframe Arrow CGI. This name is absolutely horrible for this, but I'm using it. Where everything was just a wireframe or just made up of lines. Not quite 3D. This began in 1961 with rendering of a planned highway made by the Swedish Royal Institute of Technology on a BESC computer. It serves to show how a planned highway would look. It uses vector graphics to present a 3D object. It maps out the X and Y values using code, but it does look like it's meant to. Somewhat. This is more of a technical marvel than anything else. And the fact it aired on national television is impressive. For its time, it looks good and still kind of holds up today. The next major innovation is Ivan Sutherland's Sketchpad. This program not only is innovative for its CGI, it's the grandfather to all modern CAD programs. But what exactly is this computer sketchpad? The computer sketchpad was a program developed by Ivan Sutherland for the Lincoln TX2 computer, using straight-up machine code. The program was programmed onto an analog computer. The program had it to where you could map multiple points onto a monitor, and it would build lines or create circles based off of the instructions given to it. It was controlled by a little box with knobs that allowed people to control what it was doing and give it commands. Not only is this a breakthrough in CGI, it's a breakthrough in CAD programs. But that's not it. It is one of the first user-friendly programs ever. You just had to map points out on a monitor and not much else. So this did a lot for CGI, CAD programs, and user-friendly interfaces. This program proved computers could be used for artistry, and it did actually make the process of making 2D plans and drawings easier because it didn't use up paper, and it could be used to represent 3D without being 3D via the use of wireframes. Ivan Sutherland is known as the grandfather of computer graphics, and pioneered the field of computer graphics. He's taught at many places and has won many awards. He is a truly smart man who did a lot for computer graphics, the internet, and computer science as a whole. CGI in the 60s continued on this path, with scientific tests and other types of films being produced, like Computer Ballet, the first computer animation of a human, created by Michael Knoll, an American engineer and professor of multiple degrees, known for his work in computer art and communications. He created Computer Ballet at Bell Labs. But how were animations like this created? Well, in the behind the scenes provided with this film, it is said that part of the code is instructed with drawing the stage, and then there is code that controls the ballet dancers and their positions. This code is then put onto magnetic tape, and then is carried out as instructions by the computer, and put on screen by a cathode ray tube. It is a truly impressive piece of work and shows how humans, when making art, tend to make humans. It is very impressive for its time, and it cannot be underestimated how impressive it is, considering something like it had not been done before. And I suggest you watch the behind the scenes video that went with it. It's really nice, and shows a lot more than I could say in this video. Michael Knoll at Bell Labs also created another film in the 60s showing off the fourth dimension. With a stereoscopic 3D effect, he used a program to create two images that were slightly tweaked in perspective, one image to the left and the other to the right. These will be changed and moved to create two different videos, so that when it was viewed with a special type of glasses, it would look 3D. The program used to make the 3D objects created lines and points to represent the sides of the 3D objects, and formulas were created to go from one image to the next one, creating the animation we see on screen. The signals were then sent to a CRT monitor and then recorded on a film by a 16mm camera. Now I have to introduce you to a new topic, digital morphing, a different way of animating on computers. The process involves distorting a photo a tiny bit and then fading it into another, having corresponding parts being used in the morphing, with points being marked on both images, telling the computer where everything is meant to go. I hope I did a decent job at explaining that because, good God, that is hard to explain. This technique was used in the short film Hummingbird by Charles Suzuri and James Schaffer. Each frame was programmed and fed into a computer. This showed a different way of doing computer graphics and looked quite good for its time. It took over 30,000 frames to make this, so even if it doesn't look impressive today, you do have to realize the sheer amount of effort that got put into this. I mean, it's just a simple work of art and technology. I'm going to ask you all a question. Do you know what motion capture is? Well, for those who don't know, it's when a person's movements are saved and mapped into an animated character or a rig or a model. Well, you may not know you have seen it, but once you know how it looks, you know when it is used. You may think it's a recent invention. If this video has taught you anything, it's to expect unexpected things, because the first use of motion capture was in 1967 with a film called Stickman, created by Lee Harrison, another pioneer in CGI. He created a system called Animac, in which he animated using digital circuits and a CRT monitor. He used Animac on this film as well, but he did do a bit more than just that this time. To make this first motion capture, he created line segments and linked them together, like a tree, building a primitive version of a skeleton that 3D models use today. The controls to this were mapped to a harness, and the movements were recorded on film. This is called digital puppetry. It's when a 2D or 3D thing is rendered in real time and manipulated to move. So the thing you see on screen was also made by Animac. This was the ABC logo from the time. It was meant to read off election results, but yeah, it kind of didn't look good. And even on the Ultimate History CGI website, it says, the executives didn't buy it. It was impressive for 1968, but simply didn't look that good. While I was looking at the Ultimate History CGI website, I found out about a show called Turn On. What is the show Turn On, and what does this have to do with anything? The show Turn On was a comedy show aired on ABC in 1969. But here's the thing, it was cut in the middle of airing. It just stopped airing in the middle of the broadcast. Well, why is this? Well, the show called Turn On was a bit more of a darker comedy with sex and religious jokes that people at the time were not comfortable with. And so it was pulled from airing. The concept of the show was that it was the first computerized comedy show, and this idea came from the mind of Digby Wolfe and George Schlattner, with actor Tim Conway as the host. The plot was about a computer program making a sketch comedy show, and the show itself had sets with white backgrounds, and sections were done in animation, stop motion, live action, and even CGI, to get that point across. That this was made by a computer, when it truly wasn't made by a computer. But going through the effort of getting CGI in the 60s to sell the computer gimmick of the show, it's really impressive. Sadly, it was taken off air, and it was a bit too ahead of its time. But the first episode has been uploaded, so we can watch it along with the CGI clip. So let's see what the CGI used to Turn On looks like. The CGI section features a woman dancing with the motion capture handled by Scanimate, which is something that I'll explain in the next video, using the Animac system. There's even an image of the motion capture being used in the middle of it, which is pretty interesting. So this is the same as prior Animac films, with the CGI relying on math, and then the results being recorded on film. This was not easy to do, as I keep saying, and it was done just to sell the joke that the comedy was computer generated, which is interesting. Much like Turn On itself, if you are interested, you can find episode 1, 2, and the unfinished third episode on YouTube. But personally, I am going to skip out on this one. For this video, I have mostly been looking at what the West was doing. So what if we go and look at the Soviet Union? Oh wow. That looks a bit different. So what exactly is going on here? It's clear that all the art here is made up of text, but how did they do this? Well, a bunch of Soviet scientists, specifically physicists and mathematicians led by Nikolai Kost... I'm gonna put that on screen, I don't know how to pronounce that, sorry. No disrespect meant. The group worked on a Besom 4 computer, in which they made a program for solving equations. What they did with this computer was even more impressive. They had it print out hundreds of frames of symbols, each frame being a frame of the animation, then recorded the animation. The animation being a cat that went from a realistic cat to cartoony, and yeah, most people say this is creepy, but I personally like the look of this. It is clearly different from the rest of the things we've seen so far. They had access to different resources and so made something different. It's still good and honestly really impressive in its own right. You do really have to respect the work that the Soviet scientists put into this.
Now, everyone, it's time for the moment you've all been waiting for. Everyone's favorite game show, Moonlanding footage or CGI. On this show you can expect us to put a video on the screen, and it's up to our lucky guest to choose if it's Moonlanding footage or CGI from the time period. You, the audience, can guess too if you want. If you guess correctly, you get a point, and if you guess incorrectly, you lose a point. You can exchange your points at the end of the game for a prize, but if you have negative points, we can steal stuff from your house. I'm your host, RetroDark, and be ready, because it starts in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, blast off!
I'm not a real person. Why am I here?
Shut up, don't worry about this.
Let's start this.
Okay, so today I will show you 2 clips of CGI and 2 Moonlanding clips. It is up to you to determine what's what. I explained how all this works already, so why am I explaining this again?
Show me the Godam clip, you lazy asshole.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Well, that is clearly CGI.
Ooh, sorry, that's not it. That is the 1969 moon landing footage of when Neil Armstrong first landed on the moon.
What the there is no way with 1960 tech that the Earth managed to land on the moon. It was a conspiracy. You know me. You listen to big government. Sheep.
You have -1 point. You better actually get the next one right.
That is clearly the CGI test made by the government before they made the final. Clearly, they wanted to impress the USSR.
You are right, but so wrong. This is a CGI test, but not in that sense.
Well, now I have rare points. Maybe I can walk away with some shit.
This is a computer-made movie. The box represents a...
That is clearly more CGI made by the big government.
Correct. This is created by Edward Zajac at Bell Labs on an IBM 7090 programmed in Fortran.
Did you say Fortran? I
Get the
love
hell out of here. Remember the gravity simulation I showed earlier? Now I'll explain how it was made. It was produced by Edward Zajac at Bell Labs on an IBM 7090 programmed in Fortran. Calculations given to it via punch cards. The film recording of it was narrated by Zajac. It is demonstrated how a satellite can be stabilized in orbit. Recorded on a Stromberg Carlson 4020 film recorder, Zajac would go on to publish multiple articles on how CGI works. Some even say this is the first use of CGI because of how 3D looking it is, but I don't really count it as the first. I mean, you've seen the video. That was a good little trip to the 60s. There are some things I didn't quite cover, but I do think I got a good chunk of information. Let's go on to the next portion of the video, the 70s. It started out much like the 60s. Animators were mostly just dudes who were into computer science. Tech improved, but some of these guys just really sucked at animation. The example that comes to mind is the Apteryx. They even mess it up in the video, like Jesus Christ. And the Easter Bunny, a 2D animated film using the same tech used in prior Animac films, like we've seen before, but done to a much larger and better extent. All the movements were done in real time, depicting the Easter Bunny talking to some bird thing. The entire thing is meant to replicate a classic, cartoon. down to the music and just general vibes, but like most old CGI, there's something uncanny but kind of charming. It's a technical leap, for sure, and it's getting close to being something called Scanimate, but it's not quite there yet. This will continue to be a trend throughout the 70s. Well, here we are. 1972. This is where we witnessed the single greatest leap in 3D technology, the first polygonal CGI animation. This is the first polygonal animation, as I said, the first polygonal CGI ever, and this is what we would call the first actual use of CGI as we know it. And it would change the world forever. Well, that's the end of the video. The next part will be about the 70s and 80s, talking about the rise of this new polygonal CGI, and some other stuff on the side, like remember when I mentioned Scanimate? That's there too. Have a good time and see you next video. I hope you'll see the part 2 to this video, and I hope you'll enjoy it. Bye bye!
Hey, editing RetroDark here. You may have seen that I didn't include 2001: A Space Odyssey in this video, and there's a reason for that. It's because I want to make my own video on it, and I feel like just pointing out a small little CGI clip in that masterpiece of a movie just wouldn't feel right, because that movie has so many great practical effects, and I don't want to include it in a CGI video. It's my favorite movie of all time, and I'm more than likely going to make a video just covering the special effects and the CGI, the one like tiny clip of CGI in that entire movie. I promise, I didn't forget it, so don't yell at me in the comments over it. But I do suggest you point out any flaws that I had with this video, anything you feel like I forgot in the video. Thank you, have a good day.